In this video, we're going to look at Cisco's port security. Now, port security allows you to tell the switch a maximum number of MAC addresses or specific MAC addresses that you allow on a port. So we're going to go ahead and go through that whole configuration utilizing one switch and a couple of computers. So let's pull up a 2950. We're going to grab 3 generic computers. And we're also going to grab a hub. Okay, once we have them on there, first thing we want to do though is we're going to go ahead and go into the switch and start doing some configuration. So remember, to get into user exec, we use enable, and then to configure, conf t. Now we're going to issue the switch port. I'm sorry. First, we have to get into the interface. So in this case, we're just going to configure 2 interfaces. So we're going to go interface. And since we're going to do 2, we'll make it easy on ourselves and do them as a range. Fast Ethernet 0/1-2. Now all the commands that we put in are going to be for both Fast Ethernet 1 and 2. So once we're in the interface, we can issue the switch port security command. And if we question mark it, we're going to see a bunch of our options. One of them is the MAC address, so we're going to start off with that. Then if we question mark that, we'll see our options there. One is to enter the actual MAC address. So if you know the MAC address of a machine that you want to be able to access that port, you can put it in. If we just want to let it learn what the MAC address is of the existing devices or one that you're about to plug in, we can use sticky. So with sticky, it's going to learn that and it will add that to our configuration. Now I'm going to hit my up arrow and we'll backspace and we'll go back and see what some of our other options were. So, well, I just hit enter by accident and we got a couple errors here, which I'll explain. I was going to plan on explaining later, but we'll just go over them now. So once you've done configuring all of the options, like here with the MAC address, the maximum and the violation, you still have to enable switch port security on the actual ports. And the way you do that is simply by the command switch port security. However, we got these command rejected because these 2 ports are still set up as dynamic ports. So the first thing we need to do is we need to do switch port mode and make those access ports, because you cannot enable port security on a dynamic or trunk port. You have to do it on the mode on a access port. So let me go ahead and hit enter for that. And now we'll go back up into port security and let's do the maximum. So if we put in a question mark, you can see the maximum number of addresses you will allow. In our testing case here, we're just going to do 1. If you're in an enterprise environment where you have voice over IP phone and then computers behind them, then you would typically use 2. However, you can say switch port max security maximum voice VLAN of 1, and then for data access of 1. But unfortunately, in the packet tracer, it doesn't have those options. So we're going to say switch port security maximum 1, which is the default. So when we actually go to look at the config, it won't even include that because it's the default. So last thing we want to configure here is the violation. So when we look at the violation, we have protect, restrict, and shut down. So shutdown would physically shut the port down once you violate the maximum number of MAC addresses. So you have somebody plug in a second switch, or second computer, second device on that port, and that port would go down. The restrict will put the interface into a mode that it won't bring it down, but it'll prevent that second, third, fourth computer from being able to send data over the network. So it'll prevent those items. However, the original Mac, the original device, will be able to continue sending. And with restrict, it will increase the violation number, which we'll see when we do some show commands. And then the last item, the restrict, will do the same thing as protect, but it won't increase the switch port violation count. All right, so we're going to go ahead and use the restrict. And I'm going to go ahead, if you remember I said you do all the configuration components, and then you have to do the switch port security command by itself to actually essentially turn it on. This time we didn't get an error like we did up here before because we put these switch ports in access mode. So now I want to go to those PCs. And let's get these things quickly configured. Okay, and last one. Okay. Now let's wire these up. So we're going to go our connections. We're going to wire the PC into the switch. We're going to wire the hub into the switch. And we're going to wire the PC, this first PC, into the hub. So now if I go to the first PC and I try to ping the second one, we will eventually get replies. The interfaces still are negotiating to come up. Here we go. Remember, when you first plug devices in, they take a little bit of time to negotiate speed, duplex, all that stuff, and eventually come up. So now if we take a look at the switch, and I'm hitting Control Z, and now a show running config. Here we can see on switch port 1, interface Ethernet 01 and 02, we have all of our settings, and it learned the MAC address of those devices that we have attached. So this first one ends in 4386. If we take a look at it, we go over to the config, 4386. Okay, so it adds it to your configuration. And so if we do a write, the next time this device reboots, that information will be in there. So if we do a show port security command, we can see a summary by Ethernet port and the maximum number of addresses and the current number of addresses each one has, along with any security violation counts and the action that it's going to take when there's a violation. Now if we run that command, but this time say we want to run it for a specific interface, we're going to get a little bit more detail. Okay. So let's come back over here, and now let's wire the second PC into the hub, which again is connected into that switch. So once we do that, we're now going to have two devices, two Macs, coming through this hub to that switch. And at that point, we should get a port security violation. Okay, so we'll come back over here. We'll give it a couple seconds. Looks like everything's green. So here we go. We see a security violation. Fast Ethernet 02. So we look at the detail on 02. That's what we got. Here's our security violation. Okay. If we run the show port security address command, it's another way to see what addresses are assigned to or are assigned or learned to the particular ports or interfaces. So if we go back over here to our first PC, and again, we try to ping that 1.2, we're going to be successful. If we try to ping 1.3, we're not going to be successful because port security is now restricting any and all access from at this point in this interface to this device. So PC1 and PC2 could ping each other all day long, but once it tries to get inside the network, it's going to fail. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of how to configure port security and get you going on the right track. Thanks.